Jill Abramson, a former executive editor over at the New York Times, called the publication's coverage of the World Economic Forum a corrupt circle jerk, in which I agree, but it would have been far better if she had this mentality and attitude when she was still the executive editor over at the New York Times. But nonetheless, she emailed the following quote to the editor-in-chief of Semafor. She wrote, quote, "I noticed after I was gone, much more news coverage in the Times of Davos, quoting the attendees and speakers at those endless panels. Of course, the coverage was a sweetener to flatter the CEOs by seeing their names in the New York Times so that they would then speak at high-dollar New York Times conferences and, of course, get phony news stories from the conferences into the paper. It was and is a corrupt circle jerk." A lot of fascinating insight there. Seems like she's very familiar with how things really work with legacy media outlets like the New York Times. I have a lot more to say about it, but Cenk, I want to get your thoughts first.
Yeah, so guys, this is what's so frustrating about it. She was not a mid-level manager. She was the executive editor. She knows exactly what happens at the New York Times. And when they're inside mainstream media, they're all like, no, I don't, what do you mean? What do you mean? No, we're corruption, no way. We're the most objective thing on planet Earth. Corporations are by their nature beautiful and lovely and awesome, and their executives are just amazing people looking to do great things in the world. And then as soon as they leave mainstream media, they're like, we were just lying the whole time. Okay, yeah.
It's worse than that though, because in my opinion, the coverage of the World Economic Forum hasn't changed much since she left the New York Times. I say it's worse because she's pretending as if things were different when she was in charge.
No, they were not at all different.
They were not. So please take some responsibility for the fact that it was a circle jerk when you were there and continues to be a circle jerk today.
I'll just add one more thing and then we'll get back to this story. I talked to a couple of people that left MSNBC after I did, right? I was there a long time ago, over a decade ago. And when I left, they backed management. They were like, I don't know what you're talking about, Cenk. MSNBC's great, we do wonderful programming here, we're for the people. And then later, the same thing happened to them. And then when they left, then they came to me and talked to me and they were like, oh my God, you're right. It turns out they just want you to support the powerful. Of course. And guys, think about it, how do they make their money? The New York Times represents two sets of people. Their viewers, their readers, because now a lot of their money comes from subscription, but their readers are in the top 10%, let's be honest, okay? A huge percentage of them. So they fluff them. They give them what they want to hear, kind of like Fox News does with the right wing. They give them what they want to hear, right? And they also make tons of money from advertisers that come from corporations and these conferences, which you know nothing about, but the industry knows all about it. And they make a killing from those conferences, and the only people at the conferences are corporate executives and corporate sponsors.
What's also interesting is that Andrew Ross Sorkin, of all people, had some pretty aggressive and critical things to say about the World Economic Forum. So let's get to that. He published an op-ed in the Times saying this: is Davos, that's the World Economic Forum, becoming more and more of a giant business conference despite its high-minded mission statement? This year, many of the world's most influential heads of state aren't here, but CEOs are well represented, including Amazon's Andy Jassy, JP Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon, Microsoft's Satya Nadella, Pfizer's Albert Bourla, and countless others. Many aren't participating in public panels either. They're holding private meetings with existing and prospective clients at hotels scattered across town. To which Cenk would say,
of course.
Nice.
By the way, we showed video of Elon Musk there, but Elon Musk was not invited this year. And he caught feelings over it, was like, I didn't want to go anyway. All right. but
honestly, it makes him look good to not be there.
Totally.
Yeah,
he should be thrilled that he's not there.
You know who was there? We talked about it earlier. Two senators, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin.
Of course.
And guess what they did, Cenk? I don't know if you missed this video. It was while you were away. Let's actually toss that video right now because they high-fived each other over something.
So I think that this is an opportunity for us as a country to look back and say, is this partisanship serving us? I would posit to you that it's not. And so
Thank
while
you.
some would say that there were reluctant folks working in Congress in the last 2 years, I would actually say that that was the basis for the productivity for some incredible achievements that made a difference for the American people in the last 2 years.
And we still don't agree on getting rid of the filibuster.
That's correct.
Thank you.
High-fiving each other over keeping the filibuster in place, which is why legislation that would actually improve your lives ends up dying in the Senate.
So she's bragging about bipartisanship, that she and Manchin work with the Republicans to kill higher wages, $15 minimum wage, to kill paid family leave, to kill everything that would help the average American worker. But remember, they're talking to an audience of the richest people in the world, and giant mainstream media. So when they say bipartisanship, they mean we serve corporate interests and we crush middle class and working poor for a living. And then they high five over it, and the crowd loves it, and the crowd goes nuts because that's what they invited them for. These are our servants. Hey, servants, get out there and tell us how you served us. Now, did the New York Times ever tell you, oh, these sons of bitches are so incredibly corrupt that they took checks from the National Restaurant Association the day that they killed $15 minimum wage, that they get bribed on a regular basis? New York Times, to be fair, did have one story about how Manchin actually does take checks from the industries that he helps. So wow, one story, nice job, New York Times. But overall, I mean, they don't even cover this. She obviously murdered a sheep and put it around her neck before she came on. I mean, what the hell was that? Okay, she loves being flamboyantly
Annoying.
Like she's the Marie Antoinette of our current American government, right? Let them eat cake while we, go over to Davos and feast on this stuff. But back to the media, Jill Abramson, and come on. So look, I love that she's admitting it now, and that's as much of an insider as you could possibly get, saying, yeah, obviously the whole point of the New York Times is to serve the rich, right? But they never say it when they're in power, never, because they're getting that nice check. So when you hear mainstream media pretending to be objective, know that it's total BS. It's corporate propaganda.
In one of Nomi Prinz's books, I've read so many of them that I'm forgetting which one exactly she wrote about this in, but it was the World Economic Forum right before the economic collapse in 2008. And what stood out to her was how all these corporate executives knew what was coming. They were panicking about it, which means, look, she was a journalist at the time, right? If I'm not mistaken. But either way, if she noticed the conversations that were taking place, I have no doubt that the journalists there also noticed the conversations taking place. Now, Nomi Prinz left Wall Street to be an independent journalist. Independent journalists get absolutely no attention, so she could be screaming about it from the rooftops and barely anyone pays attention. But did the New York Times report on the panic that was ensuing at the World Economic Forum right before the economy collapsed, thanks to the disgusting fraud that was committed by these banks?
And by the way, look, and we're fair. Earlier in the show, we gave credit to the New York Times for a really good story about restaurants and corruption in that industry, right? And I would give them endless credit if they wrote good stories every day, right? But they don't. Here, I can prove it to you. Did they? How about Iraq War? They marched us right into the Iraq War, and then afterwards they go, "Oops, golly gee, did we get all of our reporting wrong there?" The 2008 crash, the recent crash that just happened. All of those stories, all those giant stories, they never get it right. They never can figure it out before it happens. Why?
George Santos.
No, are they all the worst? Well, yeah, Santos a little bit too. Are they the worst journalists in the world? Kind of, but that's not the main reason. It's groupthink. They go to places like Davos, they get notes from the rich people, and then they write down what they think is news, but it isn't news. It's propaganda. That's why it's always sunny until, oh my God, these corporate masters who we've been serving the whole time, it turns out they were bungling idiots and it ruined the entire global economy. But the New York Times didn't write a single story about that before the 2008 crash. And every time they go, oh my God, we missed it again.
Okay, I just, there's so many details that I want to share with you guys. Two things though that I just have to. Number one, they have themes every year at the World Economic Forum, okay? And in 2016, they published a video that stated that by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. What you want, you'll rent and it'll be delivered by drone. Yeah, because that is what Americans are really looking forward to, right? The idea of never owning anything and having to rent everything from corporate overlords. Okay, it's just.
How could you write that story? The number one way that Americans acquire wealth is through their homes. Everybody knows that.
No, but you won't own a home and you'll like it, Jake.
You won't like it, you'll have no money. You'll have acquired no assets at all. You don't know that? You're a reporter that wrote about that and you don't know it? Come on, man, this is pathetic.
Okay, and in 2022, they published an article that insisted people love the idea of working well beyond their mandatory retirement age. Not the New York Times, the World Economic Forum published this article. I wanna be clear about that so you don't get confused. They wrote, many people will want to work past mandatory retirement age because they will live for another 20 to 30 years, while others will need to work longer to remain financially resilient in later life. As workers age, some have no desire to retire. No. They still feel healthy and productive. They may not want to give up the sense of community they have at a workplace. And by the way, I love the people I work with. I love them even more when I get to hang out with them when we're not working. So let's talk about that sense of community. Nonetheless, and their jobs perhaps don't have the physical demands that make continuing indefinitely impossible. Others will want a phased retirement and continue to work several days a week. Now listen, there is a difference between being so financially stable later in life, to have a nest egg later in life that you get to make decisions, right? Like you don't have to keep working, but if you want to keep working, that's an option that you can make. The problem is we're now living in a society where inequality is such a huge issue that people are forced to work until the day they die. And that is exactly what they are pushing for in that cutesy little statement there.
Yeah, Anna, that's a great point because who's gonna stop you from working? Nobody, there's no law that says you can't work past 65. Why bother writing an article saying you're allowed to do whatever the hell you want? No, the point of that article is to say, no, let's make them work past 65. And let's make sure that they can't get their retirement benefits at 65. Make sure that they get it later. And every year you don't get your Social Security and your Medicare is another year that you lose the money you would have gotten from that and you never get it back. You put in your money all these years through your taxes in there, and they say, oh, I bet they want to work to 70. And I bet they don't want the money they would have gotten and are entitled to. That's their money that they put in between the ages of 65 and 70. And so they push that agenda so they make more money and they crush their workers. And all these reporters go to Davos and they're like, oh golly gee, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out what the corporate agenda was. Oh, and by the way, corporations are giving money to politicians, and then politicians do whatever the corporations want and never what their voters want. Golly gee, I'm a reporter and I couldn't figure it out. But the minute they stop working for mainstream media, they're like, oh yeah, of course. The whole thing's a circle jerk, and all we do is serve the rich and the powerful.
Exactly.